Yeah, it gives us a countdown like we're about to blast into space.
I know. Did you see that Boeing canceled their rocket?
No, who's Boeing? Oh, Boeing.
Boeing.
Boeing, or did something fall off?
Like the actual no, I think they basically are like in such deep shit that they realize that if this rocket of theirs has any kind of issues, that their stock is just going to plummet and they're going to be out of business.
Are they too big to fail? Is Boeing, because they're such like a heavy military,
They are too
government
big to fail.
contract, right? They are. They're too big.
They
to fail.
are. I mean, yeah. I mean, they carry Seattle. Like, come on. Like, that's one thing that's like very hard to forget, right? It's like we want everything to be right. At the same time, so many people do depend on them. So many people depend on them.
Yeah, I mean, it's like big in Wichita too, in Kansas. I know that they have some like subsidiary companies there and stuff like that. Yeah, it would.
Of course.
Yeah.
Think of all the contract workers, right? It's the same as OEM on cars, right? One car company goes bad, and all their supply chain, everything else like that is along with it too. So,
you ever hear the story of the pencil? It's just like how a pencil is manufactured, and it goes into like how absolutely simple a pencil is, and it's like a 20 minute thing. So I'm not gonna like go into the whole deal or whatever. But the guy basically says, "Hey, you've got a pencil here," and what people don't realize is like down the line somewhere, someone makes the tires for the truck that carries the graphite out of the mine for the freaking pencil. Like the supply chain is miles long. It is miles long. Guys make the wires that drive the little cart that brings the graphite out of the mine, and there's a guy who makes the two-stroke oil for the chainsaw that chops down the tree, for the wood and the rubber, for the eraser and the metal, for the thing that holds the eraser down, and the paint and the lacquer and the letter press to press pencil on the side, number 2, and the black paint and the orange paint. It's crazy.
It's
crazy. The supply chain is nuts. So yeah, if your rocket ship goes up in the air and your door falls off and someone falls out, probably not too good for your stock and everybody else either.
No, but it's interesting that we're talking about this, Chris, because years ago I realized as we were doing like architectural projects that we actually command so much of that process that you were just talking about, right? So when I select a product, right, and I select like a supplier for something like that, it's exactly all of those things. It's all of those things and more, right? So you're giving people jobs by all of these little tidbits, all of these little things. So I cringe when I see something like we had a wonderful YouTube video like put up of a tour of my house, and most of the comments were amazing, right? And then like here are a few one of these like, oh, tax the rich or do this and that. Like, you actually don't know my ethical background. You have no idea what it took to make this happen. You have no idea who was employed to make this happen. You don't know the partnerships that did this. When I see that, I understand the qualms, and I understand all of that. But the same thing goes as what we're saying about Boeing, right? Yes, these people do need to be accountable. And if you're building a company that's just related to the stock, yeah, that's not good. And that's not the way America was built at all.
Right.
But you also have to realize that if you can't be like cheering, let's make them go out of business. You make them go out of business, there's going to be tons of families down the line that are absolutely going to be screwed. Absolutely. So you have to
think about, like, it goes beyond that. It's like, even think, well, first of all, if a door falls off your house, not as big of a problem.
Not as bad.
not as, you don't like get sucked out every time you open the door to your house to go get the mail. You don't get sucked out into space. But I was just going to say that this, it's also like people's 401ks. You know, like if something like Boeing, which has like, I think their market cap is pretty large. If something like Boeing goes down, man, that hurts everybody. That hurts everyone with an IRA, a 401k. And it's so much more complicated than get that. Because let's be honest, if you think about Boeing, the amount of cronyism that must be going, like you talk about, like you get to choose like, hey, this is the drywall company we're going to use. This is the guys that we're going to have come install the drywall. This is the tile guys we're going to use. This is the bathtub. I know a guy over at American Standard, blah, blah, blah. We're going to use that. Hey, man, you think if that's not going out at the government level when you're spending someone else's money, Give me
Chris,
a break.
absolutely. No, absolutely. I mean, and look, that's what over the years, right? When you're a kid, everything is like idealized and you think of all these things. And as the years went on, I noticed it, right? And I saw why did this project get realized? Why didn't this other project get realized? And I'm not even speaking of my own. In general, there's so many of those things, and yeah, there's all those relationships. Everything is in the end based on these kind of relationships. My whole mantra is be good, be good and be good to the people down the line,
Yeah.
and that's the best thing that you could control. Don't waste your time, finding out on somebody else and being mad about something else. It's probably out of your control, but what you can realistically control today is your flow, right? You
Yep.
can control who you're working with. I mean, I follow your channel and I see the people you're working with, and I know for sure that it's these are the people that you trust to make this happen. It's not just oh, you know what, I need a free part. It's not a free part, and that's the part that people didn't understand when I built Bridge House too. I'm like, so we had a media sponsor, and then we started getting these different other sponsors,
Mm-hmm.
and to me, I needed to be whole with everybody that was connected to it, right? It's not just, oh, I just need to get these things done. And that's, it's so important to do that. And that you can control. You cannot control Boeing. You cannot control all of the little things, but you can control your own inner circle. And if you're doing good and finding the right people to do it, good things happen. That's what I believe.
FCP Euro is an online retailer of OE, OEM, genuine aftermarket, and performance parts for European cars. From BMW to Porsche, Volvo, and more, their catalog is a one-stop shop with over 275,000 unique products, including expert assembled kits to make shopping simpler. Actively building out the Volkswagen, Audi, and Porsche catalogs from current to our favorite classics, including the Mark I Scirocco Freeride car, they are working to have every part you need for all of your cars. Plus, every product they sell is backed by a lifetime replacement guarantee. Even wear items like wiper blades, brake pads, and oil filters, lifetime warranty. With the opening of their distribution center in Mesa, Arizona, FCP Euro is now shipping parts from both coasts, serving most of the country in 3 days or less with free shipping. We at Overcrest have been working with FCP Euro for years and can vouch for them. They are real people who are passionate about what they do and the cars we love, while making sure to put you, the customer, first. Check them out today at fcpeuro.com and take advantage of free shipping on any order over $49. CSF Cooling has always been at the forefront of quality products for a fair price. With a rich history stretching over 7 decades, they provide the best high-performance and OEM Plus cooling systems on the market today. CSF offers over 3,000 different cooling applications for the most popular makes and models on the road today. From classic copper brass radiators for Land Cruisers, Jeeps, and Datsuns, to vintage 80s Mercedes, BMW, and Audi and Porsche platforms, all the way up to new vehicles. Check out their expanding Classic Series lineup, and be sure to check them out at csfrace.com or on social media.
Yeah, I was always told when I was growing up, you are who you associate with. And that
Yep.
that comes down to you impacting them and them impacting you. It's symbiotic for sure.
Yep. Yep.
So you were born in Israel, right? You were
Correct.
born there in Tel Aviv. How old were you
Yeah.
when you left?
I was 8 years old.
You're 8 years, so you actually remember.
Oh, and on top of that, one of the things that my parents did, which I'm really grateful for, is that up until I was 18, I would spend every summer back what I call home, back in Tel Aviv. And so I would be spending yeah, I mean it really established who I am, honestly.
How so? What do you mean? How did it establish who you are?
Okay, so one of the things is that I think it's why I'm an architect, to be quite frank. So I grew up, so the juxtaposition between Tel Aviv and Los Angeles at the time was huge. The Americanism of capitalism, let's say, of everything that happened to Israel since I left, wasn't apparent when I was there. So when I was there, it was very much a socialist country. It brought up on socialist ideals. And one thing that a lot of people don't know is that it's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's called the White City. in that it has the most amount of international Bauhaus style architecture anywhere in the world. So I grew up around in a very modern city, very modern city. And so, I came to the States, and all of a sudden I remember coming like home after school at 3 p.m. and flipping the light switch on and turning to my mom, like, why am I turning the light switch on at 3 p.m.? And in Israel, everything just worked. And it's because the house was modern, and the house was made for the climate. The house was made for to work for you in a passive way. Resources are scarce. Energy is scarce. It's the opposite of America in that sense, right? So, and I think that juxtaposition of constantly like jumping between, from the Mediterranean to the Pacific, Mediterranean to the Pacific, and seeing that difference is what made me who I am, and made me, when people talk about sustainability and they talk about, all that kind of stuff in architecture, they talk about modernism now, mid-century modern, right? That was my ethos. That's how I grew up. And so indoor-outdoor relationship, all that kind of, all those things, that was me in my natural habitat. And then coming back to America was a shock, honestly, back and forth and seeing this. And I think that is what drove me to do this. And I think that's what really, inspired me to become
an architect. To save American architecture from itself.
In a way, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
honestly,
yeah.
It was, Chris, it was mostly, I think, about the human psyche, right? I remember coming home being depressed in school. Like, it was two things, right? It was coming home being depressed because obviously I did not know the language. The cultural differences were huge, right? You didn't have internet. You didn't have any of these things. It was totally different. I mean, I grew up with rations on food, and all of a sudden you come here to the States and it was just like, what do you want? The Toys R Us was bigger than our supermarket, the biggest supermarket. And so it's like, what the hell, eyes wide open and seeing all of these things. And I think for me, architecture became a symbol of humanity. And I think that's what it was for me. It was the feelings that I associated to it. And coming to the States, we had nothing. Our furniture was literally cardboard boxes from our move. That's what we had. And my dad did everything he possibly can to give me the life of, paying for education and things like that.
Why did they come here if it was so hard?
Opportunity. Quite literally. So my dad went to undergrad and grad school in Los Angeles in the 60s. He had the best time in the world you can imagine, right? It's like he got to see the doors. He got to do all these kind of crazy things. Came back to Israel, married my mom, tried to do all kinds of different things. So I grew up, my grandfather was a farmer. He grew up on a farm. Actually, the first thing I ever drove was a tractor, believe it or not, which is really funny. And he wanted opportunity. And he said, hey, there was an Israeli company that had a patent on a water filter that was self-cleaning. Again, talking about energy, right? So what they figured out, you'll get it, you'll dig this. So as a water filter gets inundated with dirt, pressure builds up.
Yeah.
As the pressure builds up,
what they that on my refrigerator, all of a sudden you put the thing down here, like the water's just like trickling out, and the replaced water filter light comes on way before it necessarily needs to. But at some point, you're like, okay, this is taking too long to fill up the glass of water. I need to replace the filter. Yeah.
So what it is they realized the patent. They came up with a patent using that pressure to drive a centrifugal force to suck out the dirt. It was a beautiful patent. And so my dad basically became the product rep for the West Coast in America from the Israeli patent, and moved us. He came in 1985. I came in 1986. And that's really why. It was opportunity. And I honestly, I owe it to my dad's risk taking, both my parents being able to do something like this. I think it's momentous. They took a real big cultural shift and change, and I owe it to those opportunities. It was incredible, man. It was just like eye-opening, and I'm who I am, honestly, because of that.
AC Solutions offers complete plug-and-play air conditioning conversion kits for your classic BMW, such as the E30, E28, and E24, and soon-to-be Porsche. Featuring OEM quality components with period-correct finishes and materials, their products are designed as a drop-in upgrade to your old factory system, but with the performance of modern technology. Their products stem from hands-on design and development with a deep knowledge and passion for these vehicles. They're designed by enthusiasts for enthusiasts and come complete with a full warranty and quality instructions mirroring those of a factory manual. Check them all out at acsolutions.co. That's acsolutions.co. Petrolbox is a monthly service made specifically for the automotive enthusiast. Each month, they carefully select items including tools, detailing supplies, apparel, garage gear, stickers, and publications to be sent right there to your doorstep. It's a curated selection of the latest and greatest gear in the industry, and there's actually 2 different levels of subscription to choose from. The Petrolbox Basic costs less than $20 a month, while the Petrolbox Premium gets you even more gear for $39.95 a month. Check them out at mypetrolbox.com and be sure to use the code Overcrest at checkout to get $6 off your first month.
So I'm kind of curious as to what you think of this. This veers off from architecture quite a bit, but you talk about growing up in like a socialist Israel. How do you feel about the shift from what Israel was as you were growing up into what it is, like politics aside, just the way that it feels being more democratized and corporatized and is capitalized a word?
Okay, so I would take away the democratized. That's been since the beginning.
Okay.
You know, it's always been it's been a democracy. You know, we were one of the first countries to have a female prime minister. You know, it's also been very much in terms of any kind of human rights. So let's, you know, without getting into the politics of what people perceive Israel to be and what they know it is to be versus what the reality of what it is.
I'm just after like the feel, like you were talking about the feel. The feel of the place.
It's still there. You know, it's okay. So why did my dad come to America? One of the reasons is opportunity, right? So Israel is fearlessly competitive. It's insanely competitive. You have, you know, they have the top of the top. If you open up a restaurant and it's not functioning in the top 5%, you're out of business. That's how people work. That's how people do things, right? And that's just how it's ingrained in our culture. It's like competitive, you know, and more and more and more and do and do and do and do. At the same time, unlike America, it is help your friend and help your buddy. There isn't that keeping up with the Joneses. Oh, what did this neighbor have and why don't I have that? So we still have that roots of the socialist and that's still ingrained in it. The biggest difference is, though, I'll tell you, as a kid, there was one Porsche in the whole country. One. There wasn't an import. One. There wasn't importing of those cars at all. A CEO
was it not allowed?
Or there wasn't money. There wasn't okay, so a Honda Civic is 2X.
To be fair, everything is a German vehicle. I mean, in the 60s, you're driving around in a 911.
True.
That's
True.
Maybe not so much.
Maybe not the best.
Not a good look.
So actually, Swedish cars did well. So the funny thing is, like a Volvo would be the CEO or a prime minister. They would drive a Volvo 240. That would be like, wow. And if you were rich, you had a Citroen CX or something like that.
Yeah.
That was what I grew up with. We had, you know, my family, we had a Peugeot 104. That was, you know, that's normal. But it was different. You know, now there's Bentley, Lamborghini, everything. Everything is available and everything is there. However, you have to understand that the tax rate is 100%. Ooh. So a Honda Civic is 2x the cost, right? So everything is 2x the cost. At the same time, though, we do have social health care. You know, there's no the homeless thing, like all of that. We don't have those kind of problems. So it's you're taken care of. Nobody's left by the wayside. However, to make something happen, you are really working your ass off to make that happen.
Did you ever see that Porsche when you were a kid? Like, did you see it?
Yes, I
saw it. Did
you
you even know what it was?
It was close. Of course.
Okay.
Because you know what? I had a game called Outrun, and I would play that with my friend and on the PC, and you know of course I knew it. It was like a 930. It was a 911, but I mean I remember in my Outrun we had like 930, and I knew it. And also, you know, at that point it was 1986, and I came to the States, and all of a sudden you see one after another, and you're like, what the hell? How are these here? It doesn't even make sense. That would be like homes. one home after another home after another home after another home. And that's what I'm saying. The juxtaposition between the two was just out of this world, out of this world. Yeah, I didn't expect it at all.
So you're traveling back and forth, and you're growing up in basically both places, essentially. And
Yeah.
as you get into high school, is that when you decided you want to be an architect, or when was the decision made of, I am going to do this. This is my life now?
So, good question. So, okay, so back to Israel growing up, my grandfather would go to Europe and bring back Lego sets, and he wouldn't like read like what the age group was, and so I would just get these like Technics, and I'll be like, oh crap, how do I put this together? I'm not 14 years old, I'm half that, and I started doing these things, and I think that is where the roots of mechanical, understanding started, and I was actually building like fantasy worlds, like something you would see out of like Blade Runner or something like that, not actual like houses. Like it was more like worlds that to me was where we needed to work on. And then coming to the States,
before it was Minecraft, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then coming to the States, I ended up. I remember I had this like stick and peel floor plan builder that my mom and I bought at like Borders, and I was doing like house plans, and I was in high school. At the same time, I was drawing cars. I was obsessed with cars, and I was just obsessed with architecture. And I applied to university. Oh, sorry. In high school, this was crazy. My high school had architecture classes. And so I took 4 years of that in high school. And it gave me all the technical skills by hand, no computers. It was crazy different. Everything was different. You had your drawing board. I would actually love to see what the classroom looks like now. So I learned how to draw like plans, sections, elevations, build the physical model, understand what architecture is in a technical sense, not in a theoretical or like good design. But I understood, I got all of the technical skills, like 4 years of that. So then I applied to undergrad. But interestingly, my portfolio for that was car design. So in my off time in high school, I would be sitting around with the precursor of Illustrator, which was called Aldous Freehand. And I would sit around and draw. Actually, there you go. You can see that computer right there. That was where in black and white.
You
and
haven't turned it into
screen.
A fishbowl yet.
No. And so that's where it all began. And then I applied to...
Do you remember the game? There was one game on those things that was awesome. It was the one that you had the little cannon. And you would take the cannon, and you would shoot the bullet out, and then it would blow up, and you had to kill the other cannon before. What a game!
It was cool.
Again, great game.
Physics, right? It was angle and how much gunpowder. That's about
angle
it.
And velocity,
and then different heights. It was amazing. Yeah. But that will teach you a lot too. Yeah, that was fun. No, so then at USC, I ended up. That's where I think I became who I really am. I found my voice, I could say, because I was a really shy kid in high school and in elementary school. And you can understand like what we were just talking about, the juxtaposition between Israel and America. And all of a sudden, coming to the States, not speaking English and being forced to, have discussions in class or read out loud. It was awful. It broke me down. You felt stupid. And then at USC, which was an architecture school, I found my voice. So by the end of the first semester, all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute.
Is there something that happened? Is there something that happened that you finally had something to say? Was there a moment for that?
It was, what it was? I think it was just my skill. Honestly, I don't have anything like it wasn't my voice. It wasn't what I was able to articulate. It was the fact that I dedicated 80-hour weeks into this thing, and I didn't leave studio. And why? Guess what? I didn't have friends. That was where my friend was the studio.
Yeah.
And whoever stuck around with me became my friend. But that was everything. And I think by the end of the semester, and actually there was something very interesting now that I think about it. So I really admired my studio instructor, and I thought I was a hot shot, and I thought I was done with my project. And so I'm sitting there in the studio, and I'm like, look, everybody, I'm done. And the studio instructor who was there for the upper division classes came down to my studio to just take a look at us to see how are we all doing. And I'm like, look, I'm done. And he's like, I don't think so. And he gave me a life lesson. And the life lesson to me was that don't be married to what you've created, because there's always something else out there. And you won't believe how fast you could work and rethink things. And so it allowed me to let go. And he pushed me to that limit, and I created something completely different. I threw away the entire project, and within a week created something new. And that taught me that, nothing is that precious except for our lives and, our relationships. That's it. Everything else is bullshit. Everything else you could just let go. And what you thought was so great, what you thought was so, I mean, I've seen you with your motors, right? You do all this, this is going to be the best, it's going to be the best, and then crash and burn. Is it a crash and burn? I don't think so. It's another opportunity. It's something else. Like, what else would you be doing with your life if you weren't doing these things, right? This is what we strive for. And it's that excellence of, okay, well, that didn't work out the way I wanted it. I did learn all these little life lessons. Now let's go. And that's how I approach things. And I think that was the little moment. He gave me that. It wasn't on purpose. He just wanted me to excel, but that's the way I took it.
And I've done that a lot with writing too. I mean, it's been like I've written, like, I wrote an article about my Pinto, and it used to be like 8,000 words. It was like this monstrosity, and I was so proud of it. And I was so proud of all this ways that I described stuff and talked about the history of the Pinto and all this stuff, and like on and on and on. And I had a friend of mine who is a writer and an editor, and he just like, dude, this sucks, man. It's way too fucking long. And I was like crestfallen. But I went back and I basically rewrote the whole thing, and something much better came out of it.
There you go. I love that guy. Then that he gave you a gift, really.
He did. He did.
Because it's important, and honestly, it's not my saying, but less is more, and just get it done. Get it done with the least amount that you could possibly do, and then you're really succeeding. That's what I think. But yeah, let go of things.
You ended up walking off to Harvard, and I'm curious as to what, like, when you go to Harvard and you're going to like architecture school, what is it that they're trying to teach you? Because at some point you get the technical stuff. At some point you either have the talent or not, and at some point you have the work ethic or you don't. What are they trying to do? What thread are they pulling out of you?
Your money.
Yeah, I suppose that's
no, Chris. True. That was really good. Because okay, here it is. Okay, so there's different routes you could go. I went to a post-professional degree. So my undergraduate degree at USC was 5 years, and that meant I had a thesis. I had all of that stuff. I had many years of also practical training of working and really doing things. So for me, grad school was a 2-year program, 1.5 if you really do it. It's 3 studios. That's my route. There's also the other route, which could have been, somebody like you, let's say, and went to school, who knows, in journalism, and then was like, you know what? No, I'm into architecture. And then you have a 4-year program. And during that 4-year program, you would get what I got in my 5-year program at undergrad. Okay. So there's the 2 routes. So you could say that the version that I had was kind of in line to what you were asking, because you have the ethics, you have the skills, either you have the talent or you don't. Those are the facts. What else are you gaining out of it? Okay. So right. I gained incredible relationships. Again, the top of the top. I have a Rolodex of people that I could call and admire that have my back and I have their back. I was able to expand my mind onto other things that I was never willing to push forward. If I had been a practicing architect directly after undergrad, I would have been just doing that one line of things. What I did in grad school was I chose the one instructor that was going to push me, and that one instructor that I didn't like their aesthetic approach, just so that I could, get out there and do something. If I hadn't done that, though, man, I don't think I would have gotten anything except for, tuition and the name Harvard.
Right.
But that's facts. So it really comes down to the student, to be honest, because you could walk away out of there, and believe me, I've seen a lot of peers like, oh, I'm going to start my own design firm. I'm like, good luck. I'm like, you don't know shit. Like, going to Harvard does not make you accountable to your career at all. It can, but it doesn't equate one another.
So across your educational career in after high school, USC, Harvard, what was something that everyone was wrong about that you've learned that you wish you could go back and tell the professors, everyone else, now that you've been doing this for so long, what was everyone wrong about the whole time?
This is a good one too, man. So my guidance counselor actually told me that I should just maybe go get an associate degree. That I'm just, I'm dumb. Like, forget it. Like literally, So I was told in high school that I'm a loser, that I'm not going to amount to shit.
I got told the same thing. It's nice.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's awful. These people are criminals, honestly. Like they're robbing people. It's what's the difference? I'll tell you what the difference is. I needed attention, and it was hard for me in that years. I was immature, and I got bored. So I would sit in class, and they would look at me and be like, "Dan, you're not paying attention." I'm like, "You're fucking boring. I figured this out. I know how to do this. This is not helpful. You're talking again and again and again, and I'm done." And so I would be disruptive in class. I wouldn't pay attention to certain things because literally I was bored. And then I remember
This sounds really
familiar. Yeah. And then I remember my trigonometry teacher, she would want the problems solved a certain way. And I would sit down during the test and kind of figure it out. And I would have chicken scratch and I would have the right answer. But she accused me of cheating. She said that that's not the right way of doing it. You didn't follow my steps. I don't need to follow your steps. So the problem that I had was, and this is probably a public schooling thing, and it's probably a part of the downfall of having such a big country, right? Where you have to standardize everything.
Yeah.
And it was the fact that, yeah, you had to follow these certain rules. And if you didn't follow the rules, you're just not going to make it. And so I wasn't good at these rules. And so I think by the time I got to USC, I was allowed to break rules. I was allowed in critical thinking, and in undergrad, you're allowed to do whatever you want. I remember we were given a problem at USC, and they gave us the site, and the site was next to a new metro station, and you were supposed to take this empty site and build a new apartment buildings on it. And instead of doing that, I literally, I thought, well, why are we taking, again, more urban space instead of densifying certain things? My idea was, okay, you have this L-shaped mini mall. Let's build the housing on top of that. And you have the subway right there too. You have everything in that area right behind it, which was we're supposed to build the housing. I turned that into a park, right? So if you did that in high school, that's an automatic F. You're not allowed to. In public school, like you cannot do that. That's an F. That's like, Dan, you didn't follow the rules.
Yeah.
But I was rewarded for that critical thinking by the time you become an adult. I completed everything. It wasn't about not completing anything. I
didn't
literally
complete anything, man. The only way I graduated is I aced every test.
Wow.
And I did zero homework. So I did nothing. I did the minimum amount to get by because I just didn't. I didn't need to do it. In my mind, I probably was like, I don't need to learn this. I can do this. I don't need to do it. So I didn't do any of the homework. I graduated with like a C-, D+ GPA, and they were like, go to the community college and get like I don't know, just go to the community college. That was it. Even though my ACTs were like 30, 32 or whatever, they just wanted to send me off and park me out at the community college, which I tried to do. I tried to do that. I went to art school. I never finished anything. It was a disaster. Wow. College, me, authority.
No.
None of it. None of it.
None of it.
Which is a bummer because I would love to go teach because it was such a failure for me.
You would be great at it too.
I would love to go and teach. So I've been investigating on how to do that. And I don't know if any of my credentials are good enough to go do it, but I'd like to figure out a way to go and do things.
You could start by being invited to give talks, and those are very poignant. And actually, you should take a look at it that way. It's very meaningful. If you could give talks at a university or give talks at high school or give talks at community college, whatever it is, because then you're an invited professional and an invited guest that somebody looks up to. During that 1 hour, you could be really, 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 really helpful to somebody in giving the story versus being the entire semester's teacher, right? So that is how you could do it. You could get invited to certain places to give those talks, and those And the kids are going to love
hey,
it.
everybody.
They're going to be like,
invite me. I'm here.
Yeah, you should. You got to do that. That would be incredible. I quit.
So I have a question about.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Tell me.
No, I was saying I used to teach, and I ended up quitting teaching when I didn't remember all the students' names. Because then I just felt like, why am I here? You know, this is for them. This is not about a paycheck for me. Like, I need to contribute. So that's why I was going to say, I think you could really contribute. And I think the kids will be really inspired by what you have to say.
Well, we'll see. Maybe it's something I can look into. So I have a question in terms of starting a design. So and it came to me because I have the question I get as a writer when I have aspiring writers and I'm not like a super accomplished writer or anything, but in the automotive world, people are like, hey, I want to write something for this magazine. I don't even know where to start. Like, I have no idea. I don't know what to do. And the answer I always give is just start, right? You just have to sit down and you write something, even if it's not good. And I'm wondering if that mentality, I'm thinking of you in front of the green, I guess it's in front of the computer now, but I think every architect, they're on the green drafting table with the big slider thing that moves all over the place in the paper, but everything's blank, right? Everything's blank. All you've got is the pencil. How do you start? How do you begin a design?
Good one too. Yeah, I forgot what I just heard somebody say that there's no such thing as a writer's block, and I believe that too. I think the only block is
you just have to do it.
It was Seinfeld. It was on a Seinfeld interview, and he was basically saying that there's no such thing, and I totally believe that. So I think one of the most important things to realize, or what gets me going, or gets me through things, is the fact that what we went back to is nothing is so precious. Nothing that you could do is just so incredible or so bad. Who cares?
Especially if you're alone. If you're alone and it's just you and the paper.
What a gift. What a gift. So just go. And the way that I look at it is that, and this is different than I think a lot of my peers, and why they struggle, is that I don't look at everything as so precious. I look at everything as, this is the best that's today, and that's it. This is the best that's in this hour, and that's it. The next hour could be better, could be worse, but who cares? I'm going to give it my all right now. And that's what came out. And I'll look at it later and I could edit it again, but that is it. And so I learned how to let things go, but you have to start somewhere. So what I like to do in terms of getting things started is try to, again, think about, what am I trying to solve? I'm a very much like a problem solver. And when we talked about, architecture, for me, was about humanity, right? So when I look at the blank paper, I look at, okay, what is this condition? If we're designing a coffee shop, here's a blank canvas, and I listen, and I'm like, what's the ethos of the coffee shop? How are we trying to change people's psyche when they're coming here versus when they're coming to Starbucks? What is the difference? And so I start going off of that. It has nothing to do with the outcome. It has nothing to do with the design of it. It's problem solving that I love. And so I struggle the most when there's nothing there, right? So if a client gives me nothing, I'm fucked. And so and I try to pull that thread. I try to pull that thread. So it's the same thing. I need problems in order to design, and then let it flow organically.
Do you ever reference something else and it's just, like you mentioned the Starbucks design with the coffee. Do you look at Starbucks and go, that's the problem? The problem is this thing, them. They're the problem. How do I solve their problem in this new space?
Absolutely. So so when we do residential projects, what I love to do is invite myself over to the client's home. And they usually like, oh, well, I need to clean up. I'm like, no. Please don't clean up. I just need to show up on a random day right after school when your kids get here, if you've got kids, whatever it is.
Backpacks on the floor, shoes everywhere.
All that shit, all that. Yep. I need that. And so what I talk about is collisions, right? That's what I call, like, let's say, problems. And so I love to see those things. I like to see what is happening, and that's how I respond. So yes, one of my biggest gifts and my detriments in life is the fact that I have senses that just do not stop. I sense everything. I smell, hear, and touch, and whatever it is, all the fucking time. And so when I'm out at any place I go to, I see all these problems, It's almost like I have an X-ray vision to see all these things, like scanning and scanning. I can't turn it off. And so one of the gifts I got, and this is the way I look at it, you wear glasses too, is the fact that I could take my glasses off. I love that. Because when I do that, it allows me
putting
to
a
actually
clothespin on your nose.
something. Yes, man. It allows me to like chill out. And so, no, I'll never get laser surgery. It allows me at night to just be like, oh my God, this is so good. And so it's peaceful, it's quiet. And it's, yesterday I went to a coffee shop actually, and I'm sitting there with my dog, and this other person has a dog, and they're pressing their dog leash, click, 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 click. And I'm constantly hearing it. I'm going crazy. I texted one of my best friends. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, I don't know. I'm going nuts. He's like, you need to approach them. I'm like, I can't approach them.
Excuse me, sir.
Like, yeah.
Stop that.
He told me, he wrote to me. He said, it was actually great. He says, I don't know if you've noticed, but you're doing blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, and actually he's in Israel. So he's in Tel Aviv, and he's texting me this. And I'm like, that's not going to go well in America. I'm like, I cannot approach somebody and tell them that. In Israel, you could. And then you'd be best friends, by the way. But I would not be able to do that here. They would just look at me and be like, you're out of your mind. You need to leave.
So I'm thinking
but I notice everything.
I'm thinking about the most basic version of a house. And it's what kids draw, right? So I'm thinking of like, how do you boil down the most basic living space, modern living space? And I had my kids draw something. I said, draw me a house.
Cool.
And the house is a box. It is a 1-story box with 2 windows and a door and a gabled roof. It's got a peaked roof.
Yeah.
What can we learn from how children see space and visual architecture? Because that's how they see it. And they see it in, I think, a very pure way. They just see it as like, this is what it is. It's this basic boiled down version. They haven't been soiled by anything. They haven't watched a bunch of YouTube videos on who the best architect is or any of this other stuff. They just see and now
didactic, yeah.
Now it's grown a little bit as they've experienced life a little bit more. So now when I ask them to draw a house, they would probably put a garage in it. They might put a tree outside. But that most basic version is the box with the 2 windows, the door, and the gabled roof. What can we learn from how children see space and apply it to how you might design something?
How cool, man. I'm just thinking how lucky you are. You could do that, and you could see, like, ask them that same question in 5 years and just see how they've grown and how you've nourished their thinking. That's really freaking cool. So it's you bring up another good point, because I think when I design, I'm not designing for the aesthetic purpose, the aesthetic result. I'm designing for that inner child, quite honestly. I never thought about it that way, but it's something that is so primal. I had a teacher who told me one time, if you have signage in architecture, you've failed. And I totally believe that. The best airports, when you land, you know how to get the fuck out of there. You just should. It's that is the sensory exploration that I'm trying to get in my designs, whether it's interior design or architecture, whatever it is that we're working. So hold on. What was the question again about the kids? Like, what do we learn from them?
How does that I guess the question is how can you design something in an unadulterated and uninfluenced way, the way children do?
I think that's inherently the skill that I have, to be able to connect to the space in a pure manner and to respond with that. The most difficult part of that is to explain that to a client, that all they want to see is the floor wood, is the ceiling lighting this way. They're looking for the physical manifestation of what I and you are talking about right now. So that is one of the hardest problems in my career, to how to explain to that, because inherently, man, like years ago, I designed this house, and the architect who actually the general contractor who built it was an architect, and he started looking at the drawings, and he started like nerding out. He's like, Dan, do you realize what you've done here? Like, this is like the Fibonacci series. This is the golden ratio. I'm like, Manuel, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I'm like, it's great that it's all there, but I didn't design for that. And so you're designing for the human body, and that's what the kids are responding to. The kids are
You may
responding.
not have designed to the Fibonacci and the golden ratio and all that stuff, but it is a natural part of
Correct.
everything. So it happens
Correct.
organically if things are done in a certain way and they're felt in a
Correct.
certain way.
Correct. Correct. And that to me is the key, right? What I tell people, they ask me like, "Oh, tell me the trends." I'm like, no, there are no trends. My favorite trend is that the sun is rising in the east if you're in the northern hemisphere and setting on the west. Follow that. We know our human body is like 5'5" to 6'2". Those are like standard sizes. Obviously there's variances between that.
Well, if you're
These are
Jake,
things that we
maybe
need.
a little bit.
Yeah,
Maybe you don't fit in there in that space.
but yeah, but you got to design for those things, right? So you design for humanity, and that is important to constantly consider. And I think I had teachers who told me at the beginning that I wasn't doing that, and I didn't get it because it was about the overall shape of something. I was like, look at this, and it was like, here I am, and that's an ego-driven design, versus
Like
being
brutalism is a
sublime.
very ego-driven design, and so is
Correct.
that. What is that design style where it looks like everything got turned inside out? That's also like an ego.
Oh
Like
yeah, for sure.
God, I
Hate
hate
that
it so
shit.
much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Brutalism. I can, I guess there's like the more like the communist, simplistic, concrete stuff, and that doesn't seem very ego-driven. But like the overwhelming, maniacal brutalism design, that's ego for sure too.
For sure, for sure. And my field is loaded with this. It's what's interesting is it's loaded with ego in representation, but within like zero. Like there's so
Yeah,
many.
but if it's someone's ego that's good, like and they're really good and their ego is awesome, some of that brutalist stuff can be really cool because it's
I
just
agree.
so ego driven.
It's so ego driven. It's so ego driven. Yeah, it can be. One of my favorite architects, Oscar Niemeyer from Brazil, he designed a whole freaking city, and they call it a failure. And because he didn't think about, or he didn't care. No, I will just tell you, he didn't think. He thought about everything, but it wasn't about the human body. It was about exuding a certain aura. But by the way, you could go to neoclassical architecture too. I just came back from DC. What do you think? The freaking Capitol isn't brutal. Is the size of it is monstrous. The only difference is that it's got ornamentation on top of it, but it's the same thing. It's just loaded with
It
ornament. It
looms.
has
It
nothing to do with the human
absolutely
body.
looms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's supposed to do that. It's supposed to give you, here I am, here's the power.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a lot of urban design when it's led by government is
Oh
very,
yeah,
you
oh
know,
yeah,
it's it gives the state power rather than
correct.
giving the people the power, the feeling. I think that's a huge mistake that urban planners make is they again, ego. They think I think everybody should live in this utopian way. They read too much Plato or something and didn't listen,
Correct.
right? So
Correct.
they build this utopia and they think and they go, here you go. And I think there was this it happens all the time when architects and urban planners get together and they try to design a community, right? They're like, we're gonna do this. We're gonna design these apartment blocks and they're gonna be here, here, and here, and people are gonna come in the stairs here, and they're trying to control the flow of everybody lives in an ant farm where you can see everything and you can see the little steps that everybody goes up and down. Like humans are just like that or something. And it fails every single time and it becomes a dystopian, crime-ridden shithole almost every single time they try to design these things because
Yep.
they've designed it for what they think the vision should be, not for what the people are actually might do. Or you know what it should be like? I feel, and I am by no means, I have no architecture education or whatever, but I feel like it should almost be like community should almost be like a lattice work where it kind of where a plant kind of grows up and fills in and all of a sudden you have this beautiful wall of plants and flowers and things like that. If we could somehow design if we could design architecture like that versus that stupid super long community that they're building in like
Oh yeah.
Africa or something, like give me a
So
break. That's the dumbest thing ever. Why can't we do the
it's dumb.
lattice work thing?
So okay. So in my field, there's a thing called the Pritzker Prize, and the Pritzker Prize is equivalent to the Nobel Prize in architecture. So you asked about Harvard, what can you get out of it? Okay, so one of my teachers, probably 5 years older than me, won the Pritzker Prize, And why did he win? He's from Chile, and he did what you're saying. So in the third world countries, they're trying to solve, oh, we got to get them housing. We got to do this for them. It never works. But what he figured out was, how do you create the lattice work, as you said, the infrastructure? So there's the running water, the sewage, the electricity, a few walls, and then the rest of it is up to you. And because what he realized is that the social dynamic of it is, as much as people want to have homes and as much as people want to have that, they don't want to feel like somebody gave that to them and now they have to prescribe to live in these certain conditions. These people are individuals. And so what he created is a sense of humanity to these government houses. And guess what? Saved the government a ton of money because they didn't need to finish the houses. He provided the walls between them. And as I said, the bathrooms and the kitchens. And he won a Pritzker. He was my teacher. There you go. So it's exactly to your point, and so
I'm well on my way. I'll be an architect in no time.
There you go. I mean, look
Chris
at that.
Kluhl, urban planner and president of the United States. Give it to me. Let's go. I'll fix it.
There you go. Fix it all. I mean, that was it. I mean, that was freaking genius. And it works. In Chile, it works because everybody wants their individualistic, aspect of it. But what's interesting is what you're saying, but that also comes down, you go to macro and micro, and when we designed the coffee shop here in LA, and one of the notions was to have different types of seating, different types of groupings, and you could design for that, right? And so we have the different types of seating, but you don't know how the people and humanity will take to that space. There's only so much you could do. You can't tell people, again, with signs. And whenever that works, I feel like a huge win. I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. I'm like, that's great. Because then all of a sudden, you walk into the space, you see somebody on a date sitting there. You see somebody on a job interview, they sit over there. You see somebody, who just wants to blog over it. It worked.
You ever go stand in front of something like a commercial place that you've had something to do with? You ever just go look at it and see how
100%.
it's functioning?
100% all the time. When we finish a project, like restaurants right now that I completed, I go back there all the time. I'm like a spy. I want to see what is happening. I want to see what the employees how they are dealing with the space, and I want to see how the inhabitants are dealing with the space. I want to see the whole spectrum of it, because then the next time we are faced with that, we could design a better solution. For sure, you have to, and it might not be the same problem. I'm always one to take to dabble, right? So it's like I take from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, and it's the same thing when you're working on the cars, and I watch it. It's like, wait a minute, I've run across this problem before, maybe on a different valve or in a different condition, but it was about the same thing. Let's see if we could apply that same resolution to this same thing. That's inherently the same thing.
So, what's your biggest blind spot, do you think? What's your weakness? Like, what do you struggle with the most when you're doing this stuff?
Interesting. Good. Oh, man. Right now, what I struggle with is maybe I feel underutilized. I feel like, we're running and we're doing similar things again and again sometimes. And then I'm seeing that a lot of what we're discussing right now isn't well received, not well received, isn't a commodity that somebody looks forward to, right? So in this new world, it's a quick and easy response. Did Kris Jenner tweet that or not, blog that, put that in her Instagram or not? Did we get something like that really quickly? I'm inundated by seeing articles and instant celebrity designers who have zero tact to what we're discussing right now. And it's just that quick fix. And what's happening is, and I could see this a lot in going on, and even in the journalistic aspect of my career, where it's like, okay, well, what brands do you have in here? Why should we post about this? Because if there's nothing here for you to consume, who cares? And that's really difficult. So I struggle with that. It's not the world I signed up for in a way. I signed up for
that's a blind spot or a weakness in the world. That's not you. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
That's
well,
like,
you need to deal with it. But you're right. That is one huge problem. My own, I, I would. This would be a good one to ask some of my staff actually to say, you know, what,
I'm
and
sure
I
they
invite
know.
them.
They know.
They do,
Yeah.
or some of my clients,
It's
you know, to
hard.
be
Like
able to say it.
that's why it's called a blind spot, right? You don't see it.
Yeah, yeah. I try. I mean, I know that sometimes, though I say that I listen and I do, sometimes I just don't want to listen. You know, sometimes you're like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, it's really difficult. You have to, like, you think about it this way. Like, I equate it like this. You know, I am a professional. I have license. You know, that's what it takes to become an architect. And so what I say, it's like, you know, if you go to a doctor and you have a stomach problem and the doctor says, you know, we're going to need to operate, you can't turn to your doctor and say, you know what, I think it's just my lanta. If you think that, just go to another doctor. In my world, you know, I'll have a client who will come back and just tell me, I want to do it this way. And you're like, oh God, but I need to explain to you why. And so what I typically do is I ask, what is the purpose? What is the functional need for this? Because then it's not about aesthetics. But that is something that I do struggle with sometimes. You know, like how do you deal with that? But I would love to hear what other people say about my blind spot. That would help me a lot.
So when you stand in an enclosed space and it's just an empty space, what is the number one thing, or what are a few things that you think define how the space feels when it has nothing in it, nobody's moved in yet, there's no furniture, it's just an empty space? What impacts you most about how that space feels?
Scale and light. Those are the two things that really, really define how a space feels, and that's how we design. So if whatever I design doesn't work in white, is what I would call it, right? Like no materials at all, then it just doesn't work. The materials are only there to enhance a certain mood. I'll give you an example. The sound is another one too. So like when we create a space and I wanted to have a difference in sound, I'll put more wood into that space, or I'll put a soft fabric into that space to suck up the sound, versus having a place that's more vibrant in sound, you know, like reverberations and things like that. And so those are my principles, right? So it's like I need to have the flow. Like, is the door in the right place? Do I feel safe in that space? Do I feel like nobody, you know, could walk up behind me when I'm standing in? Like right now in the space that I'm sitting, I'm surrounded by light, different windows, and I have the door of somebody walking in. I could see it right away. So those are the principles, I think.
Why does everything have to? You talk about scale. Why does everything have to be so big? Because I think we have a place here called Lake Minnetonka, which is a fairly famous lake. It's
Yeah.
There's lots of great architecture there. But what people do is, most of the homes that I love are already on acreage, right? And then the size of the home fits really well on the size of the acreage. However, people are broke. So what they do, relatively speaking, they're broke. So what they do is they want to live on the lake. They want to live in Lake Minnetonka out in Wayzata, or they want to be there. So then they buy the smallest plot of land they can afford, and they fill the entire thing up with a frickin' starter castle, is what we call them. It's a starter castle.
Yes, yeah, I call it McMahon.